My name is Marissa Hale, I'm 34, and for most of my 8-year marriage to Derek, I thought we were solid. We live in a high-rise condo in downtown Miami with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay. The kind of view people post on Instagram with the caption, "Living the Dream." I'm the marketing director for a boutique travel agency, which means I spend my days selling people on the idea of luxury getaways. Derek runs his own small real estate company, and in Miami, that's like selling candy at a children's party. There's always someone looking to buy. From the outside, we look like the perfect power couple. But the thing about Miami is, the gloss hides a lot of cracks if you don't look too close. I first noticed the distance last September. Derek started working later than usual, saying he had to meet clients in Coral Gables or Fort Lauderdale. He stopped answering my calls during the day, letting them go to voicemail and then texting back vague responses like "in a meeting" or "will call later." At first, I brushed it off. Real estate can be unpredictable, and I've always tried to be the understanding wife. But then came the changes I couldn't ignore. He started dressing differently for work, more fitted shirts, expensive cologne I didn't buy him. He switched his gym routine to early mornings, something he'd never done in all the years I'd known him. And the biggest red flag? He put a password on his phone. Derek has never been secretive about his phone. We used to share passwords without a second thought. But one Saturday morning, I reached for it to check the weather, and the screen asked for a code I didn't know. He laughed it off, said he'd had to change it for security after a client's kid got a hold of his phone and sent gibberish to his contacts. But I could feel something tightening in my chest. That was the moment the seed of suspicion planted itself, and it grew fast. I told myself I wasn't the type to snoop. I told myself if something was wrong, I'd know. But every time I caught the faint scent of that new cologne when he came home late, my mind started writing its own stories. I tried talking to him once, over dinner. I told him I felt like we were drifting. He smiled, reached across the table, and said I was imagining things. He called me babe in that easy, reassuring way he always had, and for a moment, I wanted to believe him. But my gut wouldn't let it go. That's when I did something I never thought I'd do. I started looking for a private investigator. It felt like admitting defeat, like I was crossing a line that meant I no longer trusted my husband. I spent nights scrolling through Yelp reviews and Pi forums, looking for someone discreet, professional, and, most importantly, local. That's how I found Grant Whitaker. His profile said he was a former Miami-Dade detective with 15 years on the force before going private. The reviews all said the same thing: he gets results. But brace yourself for the truth. I called him on my lunch break one Tuesday, my voice shaking as I explained my situation. He didn't sound surprised. "You wouldn't believe how many of these calls I get," he said. "Meet me tomorrow. We'll go over the details." We met at a small cafe in Coconut Grove. Grant was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that made you feel both safe and slightly intimidated. He listened without interrupting as I laid out Derek's recent changes, his late nights, his secrecy, the cologne, the phone lock. When I finished, Grant leaned back in his chair and said, "If there's something to find, I'll find it, but you need to be ready for whatever that is." I told him I was. I wasn't. We agreed he'd follow Derek for 2 weeks, keep logs, and send me updates only if he found something solid. As I slid my credit card across the table to pay his retainer, I felt a strange mix of guilt and relief. guilt for not trusting Derek. Relief that I might finally get answers. I didn't know then that the answers I'd get would have nothing to do with what I thought I was looking for. Grant started his surveillance the very next day. He texted me early in the morning, following subject: "Will update if needed." I spent the day at work pretending to care about ad copy for a luxury cruise campaign while my mind kept drifting to where Derek might be, who he might be with. That night, Derek came home at almost 10 p.m., claiming a client dinner ran late. I forced myself to smile, to act normal, because if he knew I was onto him, Grant's work would be wasted. 2 days passed before I heard from Grant again. He sent a brief text: "Dinner in Brickell, female companion. Will provide photos tomorrow." My stomach dropped. Brickell is full of high-end restaurants, if he was taking someone there. It wasn't a casual client meeting. The next day, I sat in my car during lunch break, phone in hand, staring at the photos Grant had sent. They were grainy but clear enough. Derek at an outdoor table, leaning in toward a woman with long dark hair, her hand resting on his forearm. I zoomed in, my heart pounding, but her face was turned away in every shot. I texted Grant: "Could be a client?" He replied almost instantly: "Possible, but behavior suggests personal connection." I didn't know whether to cry or throw up. That night, Derek was cheerful, almost glowing, telling me about a big property deal he was close to closing. I nodded, forcing the lump in my throat back down. Over the next week, Grant's updates came sporadically. Twice, Derek went straight home after work. Once, he drove to a gym in Coral Gables, one that's more of a spa than a fitness center, then spent nearly 2 hours inside before heading home. Another time, he met the same woman from Brickell for coffee in Wynwood. Each report chipped away at the part of me that still wanted to believe his innocence. On the 9th day, Grant called instead of texting. "We need to meet," he said. "It'll be easier to explain in person." We met at the same cafe in Coconut Grove. He slid into the booth across from me, placed a manila envelope on the table, and tapped it once. "Your husband is definitely seeing her regularly," he said. "Same woman. Multiple locations. No overt physical contact in public, but the way they talk, the way they position themselves, it's intimate." I swallowed hard. "Do you know who she is?" Grant hesitated. "Not yet. I'm working on it, but there's something else." Twice in the last week, Derek changed his routine at the last minute. Left his office an hour early, drove around aimlessly, like he was trying to see if anyone was following him. My pulse spiked. "You think he suspects?" Grant shrugged. "Could be instinct. Could be coincidence. But it's possible he's aware someone's watching." The idea that Derek might know about Grant, and by extension, about me hiring him, sent a chill down my spine. I paid for my coffee, took the envelope, and drove home with it sitting on the passenger seat like it was radioactive. That night, I didn't open it. I left it in my desk drawer, telling myself I'd look when I felt stronger. But deep down, I already knew I wasn't just chasing proof anymore. I was playing a game, and Derek might be playing back. 3 days after my meeting with Grant, I started to notice little things that didn't feel right. It began with the black sedan. I saw it in my rearview mirror leaving the parking garage at work, same tinted windows, same dent on the back bumper. I told myself Miami is full of black sedans. But when I saw it again the next morning parked half a block from my condo, my stomach tightened. That night, while Derek was in the shower, I slipped into his home office. I didn't touch anything, just stood there scanning the room. His desk was immaculate, too immaculate. Derek has never been neat. But now his papers were stacked, his laptop locked. And there was a new leather-bound notebook tucked in the corner. I reached for it, but the sound of the shower shutting off made me retreat. The next day, Grant called. "Marissa, I think your husband's running his own surveillance," he said without preamble. "I saw him take a photo of me outside his office yesterday. If he's clocked me, he's going to figure out why I'm there." My hands went cold. "What does that mean for me?" Grant's voice was steady. "It means he probably knows you're suspicious. And if he knows you hired me, you need to be careful." That night, Derek came home early for the first time in weeks. He brought sushi from my favorite place, poured me a glass of wine, and asked about my day in a way that felt deliberate, like he was reading a script. Then, halfway through dinner, he leaned back in his chair and smiled, not his usual warm smile, but something sharper. "You've been busy lately," he said. My fork froze midway to my mouth. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Meetings, calls, running around town." "You sure you're just working?" My pulse thudded in my ears. "Are you asking me something?" He didn't break eye contact. "Just wondering if there's anything you want to tell me." I forced a laugh, but inside, panic was coiling tighter. After he went to bed, I texted Grant, "I think he's onto me." Grant replied, "Then stop contact for a week. Let things cool." But it was already too late. 2 days later, I left the office to find an envelope wedged under my windshield wiper. Inside were photos, grainy, like surveillance shots, of me sitting with Grant at the cafe in Coconut Grove. On the back of the top photo, in Derek's handwriting, were 3 words. "Nice try, Marissa." The photos sat on my kitchen counter all night like an open wound I couldn't close. Every time I walked past them, I felt my skin prickle. Derek didn't say a word about them when he came home. He just tossed his keys in the bowl, kissed my cheek like nothing had happened, and poured himself a drink. The silence was worse than a confrontation. It stretched over the next 2 days, taut and unbroken, until Friday night when he finally pulled the thread. We were in the living room, the soft glow from the city bleeding through the windows. When he muted the TV and turned to me, "How long have you been following me?" The question landed like a slap. "I wasn't." "Don't," he cut in, his voice calm but edged. "I've got the cafe photos, Marissa. I know who he is." "Former detective, right? Whitaker?" "No, Whitaker was the last guy someone hired to tail me. Yours is Matthews. Grant Matthews." I stared at him, my pulse thundering. "You've been checking up on me?" "Checking up?" He let out a short, humorless laugh. "I'm protecting myself. People don't hire private investigators unless they've got something to hide. So tell me, what's yours?" The room seemed to shrink. "I thought you were cheating," I said finally, the words tasting sour in my mouth. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle. "Why?" I listed the late nights, the cologne, the phone lock, the dinners. He listened, expression unreadable, and when I finished, he leaned back. "So you assumed the worst and hired someone to dig into my life. Did Grant tell you what he found?" I hesitated. "Enough to know you were meeting someone." "A woman." Derek smiled faintly, almost pityingly. "That woman is a developer I've been trying to get on board for a luxury condo project. We've been negotiating for months. She's married, by the way." My face burned. "Then why didn't you just tell me?" "Because I wanted to see how far you'd go," he said, and then his gaze sharpened. "And because I already knew you weren't exactly innocent." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" He reached for his phone, tapped the screen, and slid it across the coffee table toward me. On it were photos, me, 2 months ago, sitting on a patio in Little Havana with someone I knew all too well. Evan Torres. My ex-boyfriend. We'd met for coffee twice after running into each other at a conference. I hadn't told Derek because I knew how it would look, but nothing had happened. You had someone follow me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't need to, Derek said. The guy you met, Evan, called me. Wanted to stir the pot, I guess. Said you'd been reaching out. I had a friend snap these just in case. My throat felt tight. It wasn't like that, I managed. Then what was it like? His eyes pinned me to the couch. You were so sure I was cheating, Marissa. Maybe you just needed me to be guilty so you could feel better about what you were doing. The air between us felt like it could shatter with one wrong breath. I stared at Derek, his words ricocheting inside my head, each one sharper than the last. You think I'm the one hiding something? I said, my voice rising. I met Evan for coffee, Derek. Twice. I didn't sleep with him. I didn't sneak around to hotels or lock my phone or come home smelling like someone else's perfume. Derek's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. You didn't tell me about him. You kept it secret. Why? Because I knew you'd twist it into something it wasn't. I shot back. Because I was already questioning if I could trust you. And I didn't need another fight on top of it. He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that made my skin crawl. So you can keep secrets, but when you think I might be doing the same, you hire a pie to stalk me through the city? That's rich, Marissa. My hands were shaking now, not from fear but from fury. Don't you dare compare the two. You've been distant for months. You changed everything about your routine. You made me feel like a stranger in my own marriage. I wanted the truth because you weren't giving it to me. And maybe I didn't give it to you because you were too busy looking for a way to catch me in a lie, he snapped. His voice was sharper now, cutting into every word. You never even asked me directly about the woman in Brickell. You just decided what you wanted to believe and paid someone to back it up. I opened my mouth, but he leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Tell me this, if Grant hadn't found anything, would you have believed me? Or would you have kept digging until you found something, anything that justified your suspicion? The question hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I didn't answer. Silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Derek shook his head slowly, like he was finally seeing me clearly. You know, Marissa, for someone who claims to want trust, you don't give much of it yourself. That cut deeper than I expected. Trust goes both ways, I said quietly. If you'd trusted me, you wouldn't have kept tabs on who I was meeting. You wouldn't have used Evan to make your point. His mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. Maybe I learned from the best. That was it, the breaking point. I stood, my hands clenched at my sides. My heart pounding so loud I could barely hear my own voice. We can't keep doing this, Derek. This marriage is nothing but suspicion and half-truths now. Whether you cheated or not doesn't even matter anymore. We've both been acting like enemies instead of partners. He didn't stand, just watched me with that same unreadable look. So what now? I didn't answer right away. I grabbed my bag from the counter and walked toward the door. I don't know, I said finally, my hand on the knob. But I do know I can't breathe in here anymore. When the door closed behind me, the echo followed me all the way down the hall. And for the first time, I realized this might not be a battle we could come back from, because we'd both already lost pieces of ourselves in the fight. I didn't go far that night, just drove aimlessly through downtown Miami, the neon reflections on the wet pavement blurring until they felt like a different city. I parked by the bay, let the humid air stick to my skin, and tried to slow the churn in my head. By the time I went back to the condo the next morning, the sun was already high and Derek was sitting at the kitchen counter with 2 mugs of coffee. He slid one toward me without a word. I almost didn't take it, but the caffeine was a peace offering I wasn't ready to refuse. "We need to talk," he said finally. My stomach tightened. "I thought we already did." He shook his head. "Not about the pie or Evan. About something else." He hesitated, running his hand over the back of his neck like he was bracing for impact. "The reason I've been off these last few months isn't because I'm cheating. It's because I've been working on a deal that could make or break my company. I didn't tell you because it wasn't guaranteed, and I didn't want to get your hopes up." I folded my arms. "That still doesn't explain the secrecy. Or the dinners. Or why you were meeting that woman in Brickell." "She's the developer," he said. "Her firm owns the property I've been trying to lock down. We've been negotiating in person because she doesn't trust email or phone calls for sensitive terms." I wanted to believe him, but my brain replayed every late night, every vague text. "Then why didn't you just say that?" I asked. He sighed. "Because there's more. A few months ago, I found out one of my investors was digging into me, looking for a reason to pull funding. If they found anything they could twist, it could ruin the deal. I didn't know who was behind it until I saw Grant outside my office. I thought maybe it was the investor's guy. Then I realized you'd hired him." The floor seemed to tilt under me. "So you thought I was working against you?" He met my eyes and there was something raw there I hadn't seen in months. "I didn't know. But I couldn't take the chance. So yeah, I started watching you. When Evan showed up, it only confirmed my fears." I sat there, coffee cooling in my hands, feeling like we'd been living in parallel realities, both convinced the other was a threat. "Derek," I said slowly, "do you hear how insane this is? We've been at war without even knowing what we're fighting over." He gave a small, humorless smile. "Yeah. And maybe that says more about us than whatever started it." We sat in silence, the kind that feels heavier than shouting. I thought about all the years we'd spent building a life together, and how quickly suspicion had rotted the foundation. "So what now?" I asked. He shrugged. "That's up to you. I'm not going to beg you to stay. But I'm also not walking away unless you tell me to." I didn't answer. Instead, I stood, took my mug to the sink, and told him I needed time. As I walked to the bedroom to pack a bag, I realized time might be the only thing we had left, and maybe it wouldn't be enough. I spent the next week at a short-term rental in Coconut Grove, the kind of airy one-bedroom usually reserved for tourists escaping winter. I told my coworkers I was working remotely on a marketing proposal, but in reality, I was sitting on the balcony most days, watching the boats drift by, trying to decide if my marriage was worth salvaging. Derek didn't call, but every morning there was a text, "Hope you're okay." He didn't ask me to come home, didn't push, just left the line open. I met Grant once more during that week to settle the bill and thank him. "Did you get what you needed?" he asked. I almost laughed. "Not even close. But I think I got what I deserved." He didn't press, and I was grateful. On Friday evening, I went back to the condo. The place felt unfamiliar, like I was stepping into a stage set instead of my own home. Derek was in the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch like he'd been waiting. "You're back," he said simply. "I need to say something before I decide anything," I told him. "I'm sorry I hired Grant. I should have come to you first. But I need you to understand, I wasn't paranoid for no reason. We were both acting different. We were both hiding things. And maybe that's the real problem. He nodded slowly. I agree. And I'm sorry I turned it into a game of who could catch who first. I let my pride get in the way. For the first time in months, I felt like we were speaking honestly. But before I could respond, Derek reached into the drawer of the side table and pulled out another manila envelope. My stomach flipped. What's that? I asked. He handed it to me. Grant wasn't the only one following someone. I had a friend look into Evan after he called me. Inside were printed screenshots, messages between me and Evan from years ago, before Derek and I were married. Most were harmless, but one, dated just 6 weeks ago, made my breath catch. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed together. I remembered sending it in a moment of nostalgia, not meaning anything by it. But seeing it in black and white now felt damning. You saved this? I asked quietly. Derek's eyes didn't waver. No, Evan sent it to me himself. Said you'd been the one to reach out first. My face burned. I did reach out. But it wasn't about us. It was about a contact he had in the travel industry. I shouldn't have written that, but it didn't mean anything. Derek leaned back, studying me. The thing is, Marissa, I believe you. But you have to see why, from my side, it looked exactly like what you accused me of. We sat there in silence, the irony heavy between us. In the end, I didn't storm out. I didn't forgive him on the spot either. I told Derek I'd stay, but we'd start counseling. And that we'd rebuild only if both of us were willing to stop keeping score. As I unpacked my bag that night, I realized something uncomfortable. I had hired a pie to catch Derek, but in the process, I'd exposed my own cracks. Maybe he'd caught me first, but the truth was, we'd both been caught by our own mistrust. And that was the betrayal neither of us could deny.